Thank you very much, Richard, and good evening to everyone. I have a very bad tendency of speaking too fast, so if I do that, please slow me down. Okay. What I just wanted to do was share with you some of our experiences. I don't necessarily go into details about each of the new actors, but I just give a general overview of what Ghana's experience has been. I assume. Nope. Huh? Yes, I'm just trying to change the slide. Maybe I'm pressing the wrong button.
Have I given you the wrong advice?
I don't know.
Which button should you press?
Oh, I pressed the green button.
Left and right.
Oh, it's the right one. I gave you the wrong advice. That's what it was.
It takes brains, don't worry. Okay. So I think right. Yeah. Okay. You pressed the right one, did you?
Yeah.
Not the left
The right one. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Left.
So
back, right
first,
back.
I'll just talk briefly about the country context within the. Okay. I'll talk briefly about the country context within the context of Africa and the challenges. Then I'll talk about our new actors and the form and scale of these actors. Then the challenges and the opportunities that we have to manage these flows. Then the role of our new actors and aid coordination mechanisms in Ghana. And then again, the way we interact with them in terms of aid effectiveness at the country level. And then finally, I'll talk about our aid policy and hopefully something about the reduction on aid dependency. Okay. So generally, I think the literature tells us that over the past decade, despite the global economic downturn, a lot of African countries have achieved rapid economic growth. Ghana has also done relatively well, despite all these challenges. But progress has been uneven and there are a number of gaps. What we realize as a reality is that the current global economic crisis, the Eurozone crisis, will necessarily reduce the capacity of the traditional, or the, let's say, the DAC partners to continue giving us aid. Well, I shouldn't be using the word aid because I don't really like it. Development assistance at the same levels as before. And so we're very cognizant of the fact that we need to look at other forms. And indeed, I think not just Ghana, Africa and Ghana, need to be very strategic in order to be able to leverage the gains that we have made and also to sustain them. Okay. And one way of doing that is to embrace new partnerships. For Ghana, again, there's a further complication. We're classified as a middle-income country. I remember just overnight one day we were told, okay, indicators, the database, everything has been recalibrated, and so now we're a middle-income country. And I remember sitting in this meeting, and I asked the colleague sitting next to me, okay, so yesterday we were not middle income, today we're middle income. So now that we're middle income, has that gotten rid of the schools we have under trees? Has that gotten rid of the levels of poverty that we have? What is the difference? So for me, I said, look, being a middle income country or being called one is just a mere name, okay? But what does the country's own development landscape look like? It still looks like it did last year, the year before, when we were not middle income, right? But then having this name also means that we're likely not to get concessional development assistance. We will have to look now at non-concessional assistance. So it is an opportunity for us to explore new partnerships. I think I forgot to mention the fact as well that, of course, we discovered oil. That changes everything. But I can tell you that the projection is that this oil is going to last us 30 years, all right? It's not the huge quantities that you have in countries like Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, etc. So how are we going to manage that? And there's a whole legislative framework on that, which I don't go into here. That's another presentation altogether. But talking about our new partnerships then, I mean, South-South cooperation, we heard about that this morning. And even our development blueprint does recognize the fact that we will need to go into such new partnerships. Okay. So again, people talk about, when you talk about new partnerships, clearly everybody's looking at the BRICS, looking at Brazil, India, China, etc. And as someone reminded me, I was having a chat with one of our World Bank colleagues, and he said, but are they really new? I don't think so. Because right from when you had independence, you were dealing already with China, with the Soviet Union, with India. So are these new partnerships? Maybe in terms of what we used to have in the 60s and 70s, it was more maybe political, it was more humanitarian. So the new partnerships in terms of the fact that the relationship has evolved now to have something that's a bit more commercial. And if I take, for example, China, I'm sure many of you know that Ghana is having a lot of support from China in many areas. One of the things that we've done, and this was in 2010, 2011, we contracted a $3 billion loan from China, from the China Development Bank. And this, so that's one of the amounts that we have. If you look at Brazil, we have 750 million US dollars. The forms for this kind of cooperation are different. The loan from China is not concessional, okay? So we've taken a loan, and we're trying to make sure that we can work towards using it for the purpose that we acquired it, and also be able to pay it back within the reasonable time. That money will be used to cover a number of sectors, okay? There's all sorts of things, energy generation, food security, infrastructure, agro-processing plants, the number of things that you need to be able to transform your own economy so that you can be dependent more on yourself than on outside support. Then another type of, oh gosh, this thing isn't moving, I'm sorry. Yeah, here we go. Another type of finance which we're looking at is public-private partnerships. But I must say that this is also relatively new to Ghana. We have looked at having this sort of arrangement. Cabinet has approved a policy in this regard, and we know that Parliament is taking a look at a bill which we hope to be passed into law, but it's all very, very new. We do have some pilot projects, though, in the amount of 8.8 billion US dollars. And we're hoping that when we are able to implement these pilot projects, that whatever lessons we learn can inform large-scale implementation of this kind of mechanism. There was a question that was posed: is greater choice for Ghana necessarily a good or a bad thing? Well, I think greater choice is a good thing, okay? It gives the country a number of options for financing various development projects. But I do recall something that Hillary Clinton said at the opening of the Busan meeting, and she said it's important to be a smart shopper, all right? So you need to look at what you feel is going to be beneficial for your country. So if I talk again about the China loan facility, one thing I like about this loan is the fact that selection of contractors will be subjected to Ghana's public procurement processes. And I think that's wonderful. So whether it's Chinese contractors or other country contractors, they would be selected through our own local processes. This gives us a chance to strengthen our procurement process. We have a procurement law in place. There are challenges. At home, some of us have a lot of arguments with our partners, our DAC partners, about why they're not using the procurement law. And one of the points I make is, well, you started us out on this. You gave us a draft based on international practice. We worked together. We've developed this into a law, and yet you're not using it. So what's the problem? Okay. It may sound simplistic, but I don't understand how you can start us off on something. It's passed into law with everybody's involvement, and yet it's not good enough. When will it ever be good enough? Okay. Anyway. Then, of course, alternative sources of finance also provide us a chance to have less complex and concessional financing for large-scale development projects. A colleague of mine said, which DAC partner would offer you $3 billion US for a large-scale development? Okay, so I think that it's quite important for us to use this Chinese facility well and to show that it is possible to work with a non-DAC donor to have some success. Okay. And also the fact that we would, as I said, be using our procurement law, it's a great way of trying to build our own local capacity. Okay. We do have challenges. I mean, earlier on in one of the sessions, I was thinking of all the contracts that Chinese companies are now winning in Ghana, you know, and I'm thinking particularly about some of the African Development Bank finance projects. I mean, it's open, it's advertised. You have a lot of Chinese companies that bid and they win, and they deliver the roads, okay, or they deliver the hospital or whatever it is that needs to be delivered. There was something I was very much tempted to say during the question and answer session, and maybe I will make that comment now. We've had Chinese contractors doing a lot of our roads so far, good quality. We've also had a number of European companies developing our roads. And don't take this in a bad way, but I am yet to see a Chinese company take Ghana to the International Court for Arbitration over X or Y or Z. But it seems to happen a lot with some of our DAC contractors, that you build a road, there's always an issue, you end up going for arbitration and paying all these costs. And I'm just wondering, is it really worth it? But these are my personal thoughts, not the thoughts of the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning. So. Okay. So there are times also in Ghana, I mean, the local expertise just doesn't exist, okay? So even when you try to get local companies to bid and to win these contracts, essentially they're taken away because they don't have that capacity. So knowing this, we have quite a number of Ghanaians that are working with or in some of these Chinese companies, trying to get this information, trying to trying to understand, get some knowledge transfer out of all that is going on. It's not easy, but it takes time, and we do hope that their capacity will be built. Okay, definitely the Chinese firms are more competitive than their Ghanaian counterparts. Okay, local capacity just needs to be built. Again, then again, one of the downsides is that. While we do have feasibility studies, they may not be sufficiently rigorous. So I think one thing that Ghana needs to look at is ensuring that there are proper feasibility studies, and that there's also a proper look at how a project in a particular area will impact the development. I mean, there's no point, or there's very little point, in financing a project where the returns are not the best, where you have a low rate of return, but maybe very good social impact. I think you have to look at you have to look at both sides and just make sure that you do not have a loss-making project where debts are being serviced with very scarce resources. I think basically the issue is this, that Ghana has very large-scale development challenges, like any developing country. And therefore, any form of support is important. The fact that Ghana has chosen to go along with the BRICS, particularly China, does not mean that Ghana is going to turn its back on DAC donors, because, you know, all hands on deck is what we normally say. The more people you have to support you, the bigger your need is, well, then the better for us. The fact that, or let me frame it another way. New friendships are always important. but so are old friendships. You know, you will not turn your back on your friends. But of course, the support has to be mutually beneficial, okay, on both sides. I always say there is no free lunch. There's always something somewhere. Okay. So now if I turn then very quickly to the role of actors in our aid coordination mechanism, generally our aid coordination mechanism has revolved around what we call the multi-donor budget support mechanism. It's dominated by the DAC member states because it started off with the DAC member states. Clearly, in one of the earlier presentations, we were seeing that China does not do budget support, and that's fine. I mean, China is giving us other support, and that's very much okay. So the discussions take place either within the MDBS mechanism or in our annual consultative group meetings that we usually have. And increasingly, we do have the BRICS participating. I mean, when we started, because it was more a discussion with the DAC donors, there was no need for them to be there. I don't even think we invited them. But increasingly, we felt, okay, once we've done the Paris Accra agenda and now Busan, it is important to involve everybody. And what I always say is that it's important to do the work at the country level. It's all very well in those days going to the working party meetings and so on and so forth, but you can't legislate anything from there. It's up to the country to bring all its donors together based on its own development agenda, its own priorities, and the message that it wants to give to the donors. So in the Ghana Aid policy that we have, it outlines a coordination mechanism at the ministerial level with all our development partners. This is called the Ghana Development Partner Group. We are yet to organize the first session. Because it's at the ministerial level, the Minister of Finance cannot inaugurate the group himself. He's a member. And so we need the president to inaugurate it. And that gives it also a lot more, I think, a lot more clout, a lot more legitimacy as well. As you know, we lost our earlier president, and so it's been a big challenge just trying to get the new president to make the time. But this will be done. But in the meantime, we also understand that the BRICS have initiated discussions to explore the possibilities of framing a common agenda in terms of their engagement with the process. We are yet to be briefed on it, but this is informal information that I was given just before I came. But when I go back to the aid policy, I remember the first draft, the first substantive draft was presented in 2010 at the consultative group meeting. And interestingly, it was the ambassador of one of the BRIC countries who finally asked, because we'd had to rush through the presentation, there wasn't enough time, and he finally asked, I think it was the president at the time chairing the final session, and he said, you know, he waves a document and says, Mr. President, I just want to know when we're going to start implementing this, because I think it's a very good document that we have and we can live with it. And that was very pleasant for us to hear this. Okay. Oops, sorry. So the aid policy just insists that all actors in development cooperation have to base their interventions on our existing development plan, the Ghana Shared Growth and Development Agenda. And I have to say that the discussions that we usually have with our BRICS are based on our national priorities, okay? But of course, with the BRICS, as with the DAC donors, the challenge is always the use of country systems, some of our systems. But of course, I just gave the example about our procurement law that will be used now as we implement projects with the master facility that we're getting from China. Okay, so, well, I do think that it's important that at least as we get financial support from our development partners, that we try to use our treasury system. Bypassing the treasury system has the downside of not strengthening it. We're working very hard on what we call the Ghana, oh gosh, give me, Ghana Integrated Financial Management Information System. Okay, got it, all right? where we are trying to really put many things together. There was a disconnect between, say, the central bank, Ministry of Finance, and then the main treasury, the Controller and Accountant General's Department. But that is being worked out. We've got new accounting codes and so on. So the next thing is for us to see how we can put our aid on budget so that we can have one place where we can get all information, whether it's local information, that is domestically generated resources, or externally obtained resources. So it's something that we are still working on, and I'm sure that there's a lot that we would be able to learn from a number of countries. So finally, talking about reduction in aid dependency. Our development plan tells us that there's a financing gap of 12.5 billion US dollars over the 4-year period that we're supposed to implement it. So it envisages that there'd be greater domestic resource mobilization, but also supplemented by new bilateral sources, such as support from the BRICS and mechanisms such as the PPPs. Of course, it already takes cognizance of the fact that we have our DAC donors that are giving support in a lot of the areas that are outlined there. But in the long run, Ghana does envision a reduction in aid dependency and an eventual exit. And I'm sure Ghana is not the only developing country that envisages this. I mean, we all talk about the fact that if we could just find a way of ensuring that domestic resources mobilization is improved, that you widen the tax base and so on, that would be one step. But of course, it does not mean that you would not need other forms of financing. I don't think there's any country that relies solely on its own self. Everybody does go to the market for some kind of support. So what we're looking at is a reduction in aid dependency and an eventual exit, but in a very rational and a coordinated manner to minimize any disruptions in executing the development agenda. And finally, just in June this year, we signed a compact with the DAC donors. It's a 10-year compact looking at how we would gradually graduate from non-concessional to concessional forms of financing.
Concessional to non-concessional. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, concessional to non, yeah, sorry, I got mixed up. So thank you very much.